Hello, welcome to the Echoes Across the Valley. If you are new here, please subscribe and turn on the notification so you don't miss our next video. Today we are going to talk about the scramble, partition, and colonization of Africa. To understand the story of East Africa's colonization, you must first of all understand the meaning of the following terms: scramble, partition, and colonization. The scramble refers to the fierce rush among European powers to acquire territories in Africa before their rivals could. The partition was the actual dividing up of African lands into spheres of influence, where each European nation was given a specific portion to control. And finally, colonization was the establishment of foreign rule, where African societies came under political, economic, and cultural domination of Europe. Together, these three processes changed the destiny of East Africa forever. In simple terms, the scramble, partition, and colonization of East Africa meant that what was once a region of self-governing kingdoms, chiefdoms, and stateless societies became carved up and ruled by far-off European powers. This transformation was not sudden but built gradually on area contacts such as trade, explorations, and missionary activity. The official starting point of East Africa's colonization was the 1884 to 1885 Berlin Conference. This was a diplomatic meeting of European powers held in Berlin, Germany, between November 1884 to February 1885, chaired by the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. The purpose of this conference was to settle the growing rivalry among European nations over Africa and laid down rule for how they would claim, divide, and administer African territories. No African leader was invited, meaning that decisions about the continent's future were made entirely without African voices. As per the Berlin Conference, Germany, Britain, and later Belgium gained legitimacy to expand inland from their coastal footholds. For example, Germany took Tanganyika, Britain took Uganda and Kenya, while Rwanda and Burundi were left to Germany before passing them to Belgium after World War I. The first wave of deep European contact with East Africa came through explorers. Famous explorers like John Speke, Richard Burton, and Henry Merton Stanley entered into the interior, often guided by African porters. Their expeditions mapped the Great Lakes such as Lake Victoria and the River Nile, bringing East Africa to the attention of Europe. While explorers claimed they were seeking knowledge and geographical discovery, their journeys laid the groundwork for future colonial conquest by revealing trade routes, sources, and potential spheres of influence. Following close behind were the missionaries determined to spread Christianity and civilization. The likes of John Ludwig Krapf and Johann Rebmann set up missions at the coast and reported fertile lands inland. Later, Dr. David Livingstone became a touring figure, calling on Europe to bring Christianity, commerce, and civilization to Africa, also commonly abbreviated as the 3 C's. Missionaries established schools, clinics, and churches, but they also acted as informants for European governments and softened resistance through their teachings of love, brotherhood, forgiveness, and reconciliation. Then came the powerful economic engines, the chartered companies. These were private organizations backed by European governments to exploit resources and establish control. In East Africa, the Imperial British East African Company, or IBECO, and the German East African Company, or GIECO, played this role. Though their rule was often exploitative and short-lived, they marked the first practical step in political colonization and paving the way for full government control. From explorers to chartered companies, the Europeans aimed at dismantling the concrete traditional African systems which had preserved African societies for centuries, as observed through Lord Macaulay's address to the British Parliament on 22nd February 1835. I travelled across the length and breadth of Africa, and I have not seen one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage, and therefore I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture. For if the Africans think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want then, a truly dominated nation. The colonization of Kenya. Kenya's colonization began with the activities of the Imperial British East African Company in the 1880s. However, due to financial difficulties, the British Crown took direct control. In 1895, the British declared the region a protectorate, and later in 1920s, it became a colony. The building of the Uganda Railway further strengthened British control, opening the interior to settlers and administration. Uganda's background to colonization was deeply tied to missionary rivalry, Protestants versus Catholics, and the strategic location of Buganda. Initially controlled by the IBECO, Uganda became a British protectorate in 1894. Buganda leaders negotiated favorable terms, while other kingdoms and societies were forcefully subdued. Uganda's fertile soils and strategic position along the Nile made it a jewel in Britain's empire. Tanganyika, or present-day Tanzania, was occupied by German and other and their rule was more direct and aggressive. The German East African Company first established control in the region in the 1880s, but after facing resistance such as the Abishiri Revolt of 1888 to 1889, the government took over, officially declaring German East Africa in 1891. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the territory was handed to Britain under a League of Nations mandate in 1920 and renamed Tanganyika. Rwanda and Burundi. These kingdoms also fell under German influence in the late 19th century, grouped into German East Africa. After World War I, like Tanganyika, they were transferred to Belgium under the League of Nations mandate, marking the start of Belgian colonial rule. In conclusion, the scramble, partition, and colonization of East Africa was not an accident but a carefully connected process. Explorers mapped the land, missionaries prepared the groundwork, chartered companies tested economic control, and finally governments imposed direct rule. Have I left out any important facts? Let me know in the comment sections below. This has been part 1 of my coverage about the colonization of East Africa. In the next episode, we shall discuss the response to colonial rule in East Africa. Once again, it is your teacher, Mr. Selunkuma Muzaffar, unveiling for you the echoes across the valley. See you next time.